look from your tears to your ring to the door. I look from your eyes to your friends to the floor. I look from your gun to your tears to the door. Now they found out what's going down. Guess I'll be packing up and leaving this town.
Our first speaker today is Matthew, who is from Vero, which is the voice for ethical research in Oxford. So a big welcome for Matthew, please.
We can't know how many animals it is that we're remembering today in all the world's laboratories. A calculation made a few years ago suggested 118 million. Well, no doubt it's far more now. And anyway, that was only the vertebrates, the animals we choose to count. The mice, the birds, fishes, cats, pigs, sheep, ferrets, monkeys. It's a big enough list. But there are many other sorts of animal slaves to science. Unregistered animals, species whose names we may scarcely recognize. But there is this one thing that we do know about all of them. The thing they do all have in common. They were all born with the will to live and to flourish in their own ways, just as we were in ours. It's what we may take that ancient Sanskrit teaching to mean when it says, Tat Tvam Asi, where you see life, that is you. That's a spiritual way of putting it, no doubt. But it's a plain fact also. And the great scientist, Charles Darwin, presented it as such in the mid-19th century, when he showed that all life is one great multifarious will to flourish. The mid-19th century. Therefore, the whole filthy modern history of vivisection, beginning as it did in Europe at about that time, has been carried on in full awareness of that fact. All life is one. We may or may not love animals, so very much the better if we do, but that's beside the point. What we know is that they are life as we are life. They value their part in life as we value ours, and they have as much right to it as we have to ours. Well, that's what it means to say all life is one. We know it to be a factual truth. Science itself has told us so. Well, let science practice what it teaches and give our fellow creatures their own lives back.
Our next speaker is Jessamy from Animal Aid.
I'd also like to thank you, S.P.E.A.K volunteers. More importantly, I think, than organising today's event is for bearing witness on a weekly basis, come rain or shine, to the vile and relentless harming and killing of animals at Oxford University. Your diligence and commitment to the unseen animals and to raising awareness of what is happening not only here at Oxford University but beyond is truly humbling. So thank you. I'd like to ask everyone now, could you raise your hands if you know of or have heard of Felix? Felix, for those of you who don't know, was a beautiful macaque. He was inquisitive and intelligent. In the wild, had he been lucky enough to live there, he would have played with other members of his troop, foraged widely for food, and manipulated fruits and leaves, evaluating them before deciding whether or not they were suitable for eating. To do this, he would use his intelligence, his memory, and his hands. These were the very attributes that made him into who he was, an individual. And these are the things that led him and other macaques like him to become victim of the animal researchers here at Oxford University.
We learn from our mistakes. Why don't we learn from our mistakes? Why don't you learn from my mistakes?
Felix was 7 years old when he was featured on a TV programme in 2006 about the terrible animal experiments being conducted here at Oxford. We know a lot about Felix, partly thanks to the TV programme, but mainly because S.P.E.A.K highlighted his terrible life, the suffering he would endure, and also his shocking and untimely death. They spoke his name, they cried over his plight, and they spent months trying to save him. They swore that Felix would be seen as a symbol for all the animals in laboratories, the nameless, the faceless, and the voiceless. Whilst we know a lot about Felix and the terrible suffering he would have endured, he was unusual in that he was apparently given a name by his tormentor. Unlike millions of other animals in laboratories, he was not just a number tattooed on his chest, or the number on a chip in his back, or the number clipped to a piece of paper on the side of a cage or a tank. We know what happened to Felix, so his story must serve as a reminder for us about the horrors facing countless animals each day of each week, of each month, of each year. Last year, 3.7 million animals were experimented on in British laboratories. The experiments would have included such horrors. Just think of this, imagine this being you, as being burned, poisoned, gassed, electrocuted, force-fed, injected with cancer cells, and being surgically mutilated. And when that torment is over, most of the animals are killed. The ways animals are killed are equally horrific as the way they live. They can be given overdoses, suffocated, have their necks broken, or be bled to death. And if you're an unborn animal, you could also be frozen or just minced up. Once confirmed as dead, these poor animals have their bodies frozen, sliced up, the tissues are analysed, all in the futile pursuit of knowledge. Few, if any, of these animals have names. If they do, we will never know them. What happens to them is shrouded in secrecy. Scant information is made public, and if it is, it's very highly sanitised. We're told that primates like Felix are trained to cooperate by having their water restricted. It's not restricted, it's water deprivation. Animals are being made to work for a drop of water. The researchers tell us that animals are sacrificed, not murdered. They're exsanguinated, not bled to death. The clinical language used cannot hide the violence. Animal Aid recently launched a campaign called Indefensible, which is focusing on warfare experiments. And in common with all experiments, the animals who are victims to warfare experiments are subject to the stresses and deprivations of life in a laboratory. Not only are they suffering, but there are secrecy laws which prevent information about animal experiments ever being made public. Additionally, as Animal Aid are finding out, the MOD do not want to part with the information that they have about warfare experiments. Animal Aid, under the Freedom of Information Act, has requested information from Porton Down. Porton Down, as you will probably all know, is a secret government laboratory where animal experiments are conducted. Other establishments have supplied this information in 20 working days. Porton Down took almost 6 months. They've cited national security and international relations as the reasons that they will not provide us with the information. Animal Aid has pushed and have now finally received some of the information we requested, and we'll be sharing this with the public soon so that everybody knows what happens in their laboratories, so that the animals are not forgotten. We will not be deterred from shining a light on what happens to the animals used in warfare experiments, in fact all experiments. The suffering that animals endure in warfare experiments is truly horrific. Our recent exposés have highlighted guinea pigs who were exposed to the toxic nerve agent V.E.K. These beautiful animals were exposed to the V.E.K and then observed to see if they displayed symptoms such as writhing and gasping. Guinea pigs only breathe through their mouths when they're in extreme distress. The guinea pigs were also permanently tethered to a pump so that blood could be taken and substances given to them whenever the researchers wanted. Those that didn't die during the experiment were then killed. Animal Aid's latest expose has detailed how marmosets were exposed to Ebola. We know from human cases of Ebola that it can cause horrific suffering, bleeding from the eyes, noses and other orifices. The justification for exposing marmosets to Ebola was that the disease may be weaponized. These tiny marmoset monkeys were taken from the breeding colony at Porton Down and used in experiments. Their suffering is truly horrific. It was described by the animal researchers in this manner. Overt signs of infection included a hunched posture, unkempt fur, altered respiration, subdued nature, and a reluctance to move, eat, or drink. External hemorrhaging from the genitals was observed in 4 animals. It's 2019 this year. It's 60 years since Russell and Birch established the 3 Rs. It's 40 years since World Day for Animals in Laboratories was founded, and quite frankly, we shouldn't have to be here protesting about something that is so archaic, raising public awareness about something that is so flawed and scientifically inadequate. But we will, because it's morally right that we speak out for the animals, whether it's doing weekly demonstrations about vivisection in your area, doing information stalls, handing out leaflets, or asking your MP to add their voice to yours. All of these things are necessary, all of them count, and all of them are so important and vital to making animal experiments a thing of the past, consigned to history where they belong. Thank you.
Hello, hello. I want to give you the opening lines to a poem, and I'm going to finish off my speech with the same poem. And I think I've read this poem out before on World Day. It's called Ode to a Mouse by Robbie Burns. Beautiful poems that man wrote. Beautiful, gentle heart. And he wrote the poem. He was going along one day in his field and he was ploughing he was harvesting the wheat. And he cut his scythe across the wheat and he damaged a mouse's nest. And it's the poem about that, basically an apology and a little discussion he had with the mouse. The reason I picked this, because most animal experiments are conducted on mice now, and I'll go into this later when I conclude in a roundabout way. So here's the opening paragraph. Small, crafty, cowering, timorous little beast, oh what a panic is in thy breast. You need not start away so hasty with your hurrying scamper. I would be loath to run and chase you with murdering plough staff. I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion which makes you startle. Think about that. He's apologising to the mouse for we broke the social union and that he's apologising for making that mouse startle. Yet in Oxford today, hundreds of thousands of mice are suffering terrible, terrible nightmares. I've been involved in the movement for decades now, nearly 4 decades. And it's a shame to see how vivisection has slid down our sphere of attention. The animal liberation movement was begun on the horrors of vivisection, but we've let it slide. Isn't it brilliant? Like I said, now we can go to the supermarket and I can complain about there not being a vegan pizza. And some people used to argue, look, we need to tackle factory farming because that's where the hundreds of millions are. But we mustn't lose sight of the horrors of vivisection, because there's something nasty, particularly nasty and cruel about vivisection. Tell me another job in the world, and it will happen today in Oxford, where people go into a room and they see any creature, a mouse. It's in the corner of its cage. It's wetting itself. That timorous wee beastie. It's frightened. It's ill. It's dying. Tell me a job in the world where they go in and they make it worse. I'll tell you one of a job that I know of. A torturer, say in some Saudi Arabian state or in a rendition centre. They'll go in the room, someone is carrying, someone's please don't hurt me. They're already got their teeth out and they'll get the pliers and they'll take the fingernails out. This is the level of vivisection. Vivisection shocked Victorian society when there was a few mad professors putting dogs across tables and doing it publicly. It shocked Victorian society. If you'd have had a demonstration in Victorian England, there would have been 5,000 of us here. There was massive controversy about it. That's why we have people like you mentioned, Lord Dowden. People were shocked when vivisection took place openly. And what have they done? Just surrounded themselves in secrecy and closed doors and barbed wire. But in the 70s, we smashed those doors down. We broke that secrecy. Undercover investigations and smashed that secrecy. And when we exposed it, my God, it's shocking. You cannot compare animal abuse, but there's something sick. Gandhi called it. Imagine the crimes that Gandhi witnessed. He called vivisection the blackest of all crimes. We've got to put it back up. We've got to put it back of attention, and that's why we can't just have a World Day for animals. Let's keep it posted now, because the way we communicate isn't to each other, and it's through social media. I won't complain about that now, because I got sucked into it myself. But let's not do it on a World Day. Keep vivisection in there in our posts. It's what began. It's what got people started in the Victorian times against vivisection, and it's what rebirthed the animal rights movement. When Ronnie Lee got sentenced, put in prison in the early 70s, it was for liberating mice. Maybe if he'd have been in prison for liberating dogs, people would understand it. But people were shocked. Hang on, someone's gone to prison here because they care about mice. What's this all about? I've known people that joined the movement. Mel knows him, a guy called Mike Nunn. I went to prison with him for raiding laboratories. He used to run a chain of butcher shops. And someone gave him a leaflet one day, vivisection. He thought, this isn't true, this can't be happening. And it's happening, and it's happening today. And I wish I could give you some good news. I'll give you some good news in a minute. But vivisection is increasing. When me and Mel joined the movement, there were 6 million animals being killed through direct action, through smashing those doors down, through loads of us going to prison, through Barry Horn dying on a hunger strike. About vivisection, we brought the numbers down to 3 million fucking numbers. One death is a statistic, is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistics. But vivisection figures are going back up again. I was hoping I was going to see maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 people here today. But we'll do with what we do, and we'll wake Oxford up today. But we've got to bring vivisection back in, and we've got to stop it. I'm going to stop in a minute, but I could go on for bloody hours. There's an investigation a couple of years ago into Imperial College London. It identified, because vivisection's proper closed doors, MPs, police have got no access to it. There happened to be a report here because they had an ethics committee. Oxford has got nothing like that. This report, it identified a lack of adequate operational leadership, management training, supervisory and ethical review systems. Basically, it was a hellhole under no management at all. So let me read you something out that I found about Oxford University yesterday. Basically, it's from the British Medical Journal, and it basically says, as we know, animal testing is often full of inaccuracies, faulty methodology, and what they're talking about is a study that Oxford University did, and they wanted funding for a new vaccine. And you think they'd be particularly careful to do with the vaccine, considering all the controversy about vaccines. But what they did their animal experiments like they did, and interestingly enough, when you read this report, because vivisectors, when I say they're not stupid, they lack common sense, they lack a heart, but they're intelligent people. Vivisectors, this is the key. Vivisectors know that animal experiments do not work. When you are sick, if you have children, you do not take your children to a veterinary hospital. This is experimental on a mouse. Will not tell you what's going to happen to a rat. But what Oxford University did, and they contracted it through Porton Down, the military research people. It's a military research establishment where they do unbelievable things. They do unbelievable things here. What Oxford University did, they did these animal experiments into these vaccines, and they got some positive, they got some negative results. They ditched the negative results. And do you know what they did? They entered that vaccine into poor communities into South Africa, and they lied to the parents. They said, we've done animal experiments, and they proved that they are safe. And they knew that some of the animal experiments said they weren't safe. But the vivisectors know that they've got a point here, actually, because they weren't lying to the parents of the babies, but they were completely misleading them. And that's what animal experiments were at the start of the century, sort of last century. When Victorian Britain, you had the RSPCA set up. Our society was shocked about vivisection. It was a few mad professors nailing dogs to tables. People like Descartes, who said, that's what science did. There's nothing wrong with science. I'm into yoga. Yoga's a science. But when you start calling things it, like this bench that I'm standing on, you could say it's an it. You can measure it. You can take it apart. But what science began was to apply it to trees and animals, and then it becomes just nonsense and cruelty. But all the stuff, all the food additives, all the pesticides, all the noxious chemicals that the pharmaceutical and oil industry, it was the oil industry that wanted animal experiments at the start of the 20th century. They wanted to flood the market with toxic products. Hey presto, you can prove anything you want through animal experiments. Anything you want. You can prove it safe if you use it on a mouse, or safe or dangerous if you use it on a rat. Animal experiments are lies. When you look into the world, George Bernard Shaw said that anyone who wouldn't hesitate to vivisect would hardly hesitate to lie about it. And that's what's happening in Oxford. The liars. Dirty fingers and dirty pies. I'll tell you about this piece of cloth in a minute. I've got a problem with science. I like science. But science without a heart, yoga's a science. Tried and tested. Does what it says on the packet. Promotes health. Promotes life. Encourages life. Has non-violence, ahimsa at its core. But what happens when you just take the violence out? I posted some animal abuse on my Instagram page last night. I never post animal abuse footage. But today was coming up. And then this sort of ties in with something. Fine, I'm going to tie something together. And it's an undercover investigation. Every undercover investigation that you'll ever find at abuse places, factory farms. You'll get it in old people's homes. And you'll always get it in vivisection laboratories. It's not just worse than what you thought. It's always worse than what you thought. Because you'll see amazing cruelty that you won't see on the streets, behind closed doors. Very important. When cruelty and science got together behind closed doors. Lethal combination. And what you see on the Huntington video, cruelty, yelping, the animals are dying, they're being poisoned. But you'll also see utter, callous brutality. You see the workers picking the dogs up. Those dogs have got one defense, those beagles. Beagles are used, not for a scientific reason, because they're passive nature, because they're gentle and they don't bite. You can see the beagles being picked up, shaken, full-on punches to the face. I'm getting fucking angry now. You're annoying me. It's shocking. But the normality of it in that room, when the other people are looking on, they're just looking on, it's normal, and it happens today in Oxford University. That's why I don't care how we do it. And Oxford University, I don't know if we could raid it anymore. It's so secret. We tried to stop this new centre being built. Mel went to prison for a bloody long time for it. Barry died, and we've got to smash those doors down. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we've got to do it. Now those scenes, I was in India. The home, to me, India, the home of the animal liberation movement. I was in the Himalayas, I went to a temple, I went to a Buddhist temple. And I was explaining to this lovely monk about the work I was involved in. And I explained to him about vivisection. And I was actually explaining to him about the scenes I just told you about, where they get these dogs and then inject poison into them 9 times a day. Those dogs try and wiggle. Those dogs get punched and screamed at. And I was telling this to this Buddhist, and do you know what he said? He said, oh, the poor people. And I thought, no, this is a translation error. These are monsters. These are cruel people. These are monsters. And he said, oh, again, he went, oh, I feel so sorry for those dogs, but I feel even more sorry for the people. I had no clue what he was on about. I've studied Buddha and yoga since then, and I understand it. This will sound strange, right? And he gave me this, to stand outside and to go. And he wanted me to chant, Om Tare Tutare Swaha, which just means it's a prayer to the mother. It's a prayer that we will win through non-violence and compassion. And he wanted me to direct it at the vivisectors. He wanted me to spread love to the vivisectors. And I understand that now. But that word love, we say, what's he on about? Going, would you, little vivisector? No, vivisectors have got coming to them what they've got coming to them. The laws of karma work. But I hope that all vivisectors get out of that violence. I hope that all vivisectors one day be happy. The way they'll be happy is to leave that torture lab. It will destroy them. There are no happy hunters, there are no happy rapists, and there are no happy vivisectors. So I wish happiness on those vivisectors. And the way they do that is to don't leave the lab, take the animals out of the lab and turn the labs, what they should be, into real science. Hundreds of thousands of animals are in our laboratory we're going to. Of mice, mainly mice. But they'll never feel this wind. They'll never feel a drop of rain. So if it does rain today, who gives a shit? We can cope it. Enjoy the rain. Think of the billions, hundreds of millions of chickens who never feel a drop of rain in this country. What a scandal. And wow, we've got a lot of hard work ahead of us. We stand on the shoulders of giants, of previous animal liberation campaigners, and we've got to do more. Right, here's the last paragraph. So it's his little prayer to the mouse, and it ends like this. Still thou art blessed compared with me. How beautiful. Rather than that story of science. Of Gandhi was once asked, what do you think of Western civilization? And he said, I think it would be a very good idea. What about Robert Bruce saying to the mouse, you're blessed compared with me. The present only touches thee, but I backward cast my eye. Oh, prospects drear, he looks back at his dreary life, but then he says this to the mouse. And how was he to know about the nightmare they call Oxford, the town of dreamy spires? It's a place of nightmares. Let's wake up Oxford today, but listen how he finishes his poem to this mouse. Oh, forward though I cannot see, I guess I'm fear. And he was right to fear the future for those mice, because it's a nightmare. Oxford is one of the world's black hearts of vivisection. When you go on demos, now we're used to getting a lot of public sympathy. When we do the Animal Rights March in London, you can feel the love. And hopefully people will feel the love. But let the people of Oxford today also feel our anger and our heartbreak. Because basically, let's cut the shit. The Oxford and Cambridge, the old boy network, they're up their arse and they're arrogant. But you don't fucking rule the hell of the world.
We don't fucking rule the world anymore. We do. Thank you. Power down the animal labs! 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 Power down the animals! We want freedom for the animals! We want freedom for the animals! We want justice for the animals! We want justice for the animals!
For the animals! For the animals!
For animal abuse! There's no excuse! There's no excuse! There's no excuse! There's never an excuse! There's no excuse! There's never an excuse! There's no excuse! There's never an excuse!
was one of the first people ever to infiltrate the hidden world of the vivisection laboratory. Mike was also, back in the 1970s, the man who famously liberated the smoking beagles from ICI. No one knows better the horrors of vivisection than Mike, and no one has committed more of his life to fighting this cruelty and injustice. So without further ado, give a really big warm welcome to Mike Huskisson.
Thank you for your attendance here today. It shows how much people care, and I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words. I married this cause at the age of 18. I'm 65 now. It's vivisection that saddens me. We've made so little progress against this abhorrent activity. Back in the 1970s, I followed the lead of the great Mary Beagle, who infiltrated as an undercover journalist the Imperial College Industries Research Laboratory, where they had the smoking beagles. She went in and she took those pictures you may have seen of the beagles being forced to smoke. And people campaigned against that. People campaigned by the thousands. And there were petitions and there were marches and there were goodness knows what. But those dogs were still doomed to die. And at that time, I was a young hunt saboteur. I was used to direct action. I was used to feeling empowered to take action ourselves to save lives.
Weak, and everything else had been tried. So there was only one other option, and that was just to go in there and take them out. But I had it easy then. That was the first time. The security was non-existent. These days you can see the barbed wire fences and the fancy cameras and the guard people and goodness knows what else. There wasn't none of that in those days. Just walked up there and had a look in and there were the dogs. And I went back with a colleague and in the night and took them out. And do you know what I want to say to you? One of the sad things was we wanted to take a lot of dogs. We had loads of leads to take them away. But we got 2 dogs out and we got them out onto into the woods at the back. And they wouldn't walk. They were being stung through the pads of their feet by the nettles. They'd never been on earth before. They'd never been on grass like that or nettles. They'd never been stung. They wouldn't walk. They had to be carried. And that's why we only got 2 out. And people sometimes say to me, right, you must have seen some pretty shocking things in your time. And indeed I have. And one of the lingering thoughts I have is I had to play God to those 48 dogs. There were 48 in those kennels, and I could only take 2. And they all wanted to come out, and I wanted to take them all out, but I couldn't. I could only take 2, and the ones that were left behind were killed. I went back for another one, and I was caught with a 3rd dog. I spent the last day of my university career in the custody of Manchester Police. I ended up being charged with taking the dogs away. And it went to Knutsford Crown Court, and I wanted to take them on. I wanted to take them on and put myself in front of a jury and say, that is no crime. It cannot be a crime to take the dogs away like that. But we never really got the opportunity because we were threatened with all sorts of things, and we'll make a bargain with you if you agree not to take any more, we won't press the charges. And I took that because I wanted to stay free and I wanted to stay active. And I've had a few collisions with the law over my years, but I would say to people is the most important thing is to keep yourself free, to beat the opponents at their own game, to outsmart them. Don't put yourself in custody. I'm tired of visiting good people in prison. I want to see the animal abusers in prison. I want to see them in jail. We had another chance in the 1980s when I joined up with as a photographer. You see, I got a camera around my neck and I've been photographing the march. It's what I do, it's my business. And I went in with the South East Animal Liberation League. And for those of you that weren't there at that time, those animal liberation leagues were the most powerful animal rights force perhaps the world has ever seen. They were highly effective, and as such the establishment had to coordinate against them and shut them down. But when they went into the Royal College of Surgeons research place at Down in Kent, I went with them as a photographer, and I was asked to photograph monkeys, but I went in the wrong unit and I photographed dogs. And these weren't beagles that are purpose-bred for research. These were all manner of breeds: Old English sheepdog, collies, Labradors. Where did they get those dogs from? We never found the answer for that. How much loved pets would end up in a research laboratory destined to die long and painful deaths. But it wasn't just the pictures I came away with. I came away with documentation proving the mistreatment of the primates there. The monkeys were badly housed. They were subjected to all manner of cruelty as a result of that. And some of the documents proved that one of the primates particularly had collapsed in the full heat of summer due to inadequate ventilation. And the British Union for the Abolition of Vivisection took them on. In the courts, they prosecuted the Royal College of Surgeons for cruelty to those primates on the basis of the documents that we took away. And Bromley magistrates listened to the evidence for 8 days. They visited the place. They heard all the excuses from the Royal College of Surgeons. But at the end of the day, they convicted them of cruelty and they fined them as common criminals. That was a landmark case that was brought about by direct action. But no one would have known about it if it had not been for the South East Animal Liberation League. 60 brave activists that went in there to get out the truth, to break down those steel doors and show the truth to the public. After that, I deployed another tactic, because this is what I think you have to do. We have to be amorphous, we have to change our tactics. And at the end of the 80s, early 90s, a colleague of mine, Melody MacDonald, she read of the horrific experiments being performed at the National Institute for Medical Research by Professor Fehlberg, burning experiments on cats and rabbits. She looked him up in Who's Who, got his phone number. Now, she could have phoned him up and said, "You're an evil, cruel bastard, and I hate you." But she did better than that. She phoned him up and she said, "I'm fascinated in the work you do. I'd like to meet you. I'm a medical biographer. I'm trying to write a book about the use of animals in experiments. Can I meet you?" And he, at 89 years old, was flattered by the interest of this attractive young lady. And he said, "Fine, come and meet me." And she did. And then he said, "Come into the laboratory and see the work I do." And that opened the door. That opened the door to the truth. And ultimately it was the end of his work. Because she got in there and she got me in there. And we spun a yarn that I was taking video film to show to students in America. And I wanted to film the work he did. And I took in the video camera, I didn't have to hide it, stuck it on the tripod, filmed 40 hours of tape of the work they were doing there. And you know what? They were doing burning on cats and rabbits. And on one occasion, something went wrong and the rabbit was squealing. And the guy went and shut the door in the laboratory so that no other scientist along the corridor could hear or see what was going on. He shut the door to stop his fellow scientists seeing the cruelty. But what he forgot was the camera on the tripod that was running the whole time. And when we got out and I had enough film to prove conclusively what was going on, it was shown to the Home Office, and you know what? Within 24 hours, that experiment was ended. That is the power of the video camera. People sometimes say, "This is horrific. What can I do? What can I as an individual do to make a difference?" Well, we can all work a video camera. We can all deploy these sort of tactics to get in there, get amongst them, and show the public what's happening. And that, to my mind, is an important thing. If I had my time again, do you know what I'd be a lawyer. Because I think if we had decent, good campaigning activist lawyers on our side, we could tie our opponents up in so many knots they wouldn't know which way to twist or turn. So please, if you're a young person, and most of you are here, think of different ways to advance this cause. You know, I've been involved now for too many years, and I wouldn't like you at the age of 18 that might be standing there, I wouldn't like you in 40 years' time to still be here fighting the same battles. We have to find a different way, but we can do it, and I'm sure we will. And if I leave you with one thought, you know, people sometimes say, well, what is the nature of the crime of vivisection? When I went into the Biomedical Primate Research Centre in Holland and saw primates in there, I asked them how long they'd been in there, and they said 20 years. 20 years, these primates. Their birthright is the open jungle, and they're locked up in these units. Some of them in a unit where they can touch the ceiling, they can touch the sides, they can touch behind them and in front of them, and that is their whole world. This is dreadful. This is a crime. It's a crime, the measure of which will one day be recognised. And when it is, people will say, why on earth was that allowed to continue? Why on earth? And we, together, feeling empowered, we can put an end to this. But please, stay safe, stay out of jail, put the abusers in jail, and find different ways to advance our cause. Thank you for your invitation to speak.
Next speaker doesn't really need a lot of introduction from me. An actor, very well-known actor, but above that, a man who's close to all our hearts as animal rights activists.
If I fall off this, I hope someone will catch me. Thank you very much. It's really a great honor and a pleasure for me to be here and share your company today. I'm really kind of a latecomer to all of these great causes. I became involved in the animal welfare and animal rights movement about 20 years ago. I've been rescuing dogs for 30 years now, and I'm attached to more charities than I can name. I've become the man who can't say no, so thank you very much. And about 10 years ago, I decided to change my lifestyle entirely, becoming aware of the war that we human animals are waging on every other species on this our wonderful planet. I decided to make, I think, the best decision I've ever made in my life, and that was the decision to become vegan. Thank you. It is without doubt the most compassionate, the most creative, and I think the friendliest way of life. It has made me more aware of my human companions on this planet. It's made me more aware of the planet itself, and it certainly made me very aware of the cruelty we impose on all of the species in every way on this planet. It is dreadful. Today I'm here really speaking as a patron for a charity that I feel very passionately committed to. It's called For Life on Earth. It's a science-based charity, and we are campaigning for a debate about animal testing, which I will explain in a minute. The main science advisor to this charity is a remarkable, brilliant man called Dr. Ray Greek. I don't know if any of you know him. I don't know if any of you know For Life on Earth. Thank you very much. Some people know him there. Do please follow For Life on Earth, because it's a great, great campaigning charity. I spoke to Ray. He lives in America, and it's a really, we are all kind of overwhelmed by data as far as animal testing is concerned, because we get the information that, from the vivisectors who say, without animals, there would be no drugs. You wouldn't have aspirin, you wouldn't have codeine, you wouldn't have, it's true that, every single drug that ends up on the shelf is passed through a test with animals. So in my conversation with Ray, I said, it's been been going on for so long. I mean, how did it actually start? How did we get there? So he sent me some things I'd like to share with you, so forgive me, I'm going to read them. His reply to how did we get there? In the mid-1800s, Darwin published On the Origin of the Species, explaining how different species could have evolved without the help of a deity. Along with Newton's Principia, they were arguably the most influential books ever written. Origin refuted the notion of creationism and allowed science to advance to what we know today. Unfortunately, the vivisection community rejected Darwin's idea in favor of creationism. Today, whenever animals are used to model humans, the practice is based on the rejection of evolution. Creationism taught that all animals were created based on the same template, the only difference being that animals did not have souls while humans did. During the 1800s, animal modeling met with some success because it studied organisms at lower levels of organization. For example, determining the function of organs and that some diseases were infectious. Today we are studying higher levels of organization, which are drug and disease response, which is where drug and disease response occur. So why does it continue? The next big development that solidified vivisection was World War II. The doctor's trial at Nuremberg presented evidence that the Nazis used animals in experiments, but this evidence was largely ignored and the focus was on human experimentation. An American researcher was summoned to testify. He stated that animals were vital for medical science to advance. He had a vested interest in animal modeling, but everyone ignored this, and his testimony not only solidified animal modeling, it made it a legal requirement. After that, very large sums of money became involved, with many vested interest groups profiteering, and thus animal modeling became the status quo. No matter what the status quo is, it's very difficult to change. How can we end it? Animal modeling has taught scientists interesting facts about various species strains, but it has been an unqualified failure in medicine in terms of predicting human response to drugs and disease. The reasons for this involve scientific concepts that are impossible to communicate to people who lack a broad background in science. Even many scientists do not understand these concepts. What is easy to communicate is the many instances of failures of animal modeling. For example, roughly 90% of drugs that passed animal tests fail in humans. This failure rate would not be tolerated in any other field, and that alone should cause be the abandonment of animal modeling. Vioxx passed animal tests but caused heart attacks and strokes in thousands of patients. 19 medications were withdrawn from the US market between 1998 and 2006 because of severe adverse reactions not predicted by animal models. Tamoxifen, a drug for breast cancer, was originally marked as a birth control pill based on animal models. But more women became pregnant on tamoxifen than on previous drugs. It was later learned that the drug was effective against some kinds of breast cancer and is still used for that disease. After the drug was marketed, it was shown to cause tumors in the livers of rodents. Many drugs have probably been lost because of adverse effects in animals that would not have occurred in humans. The US National Cancer Institute believes society may have lost cures for cancers because the drugs failed in animal tests. MAO inhibitors were originally invented as a treatment for tuberculosis. It was given to patients suffering from TB, but they showed no sign of improvement. They were less depressed, however, and that is how we discovered the first antidepressant. The only way that animal modeling is going to end is by getting scientists to speak out about the lack of scientific viability of the practice. This way can be accomplished is by a peer-reviewed scientific debate judged by independent experts from the relevant fields of science. For Life on Earth has been calling for this and has support in Parliament, but surprisingly, the vested interest groups are refusing to participate. The debate is fair, transparent, and scientifically beyond dispute. So why would the animal model community oppose it? The only reason they oppose it, in my opinion, is because of money. So, these are all Ray Greek's words. He's a remarkable man. If you don't already follow Flow, look us up, because it's a great charity. And I'm going to get off this because I'm feeling rather dizzy at the moment. But it's really, really great to be.
Just there, see it? There are, at any one time, 16,000 animals. Right there, right now. Mice, rats, guinea pigs, monkeys, fish, ferrets, chickens, pigs. Can you hear anything? This is the silent conspiracy of vivisection. This is the silent conspiracy of animal research. This is what we're here to put an end to. When we first started the fight against this laboratory in 2004, we came down here with one aim in mind, to stop it. And we nearly succeeded. We so very nearly succeeded. For 18 months, we stopped the work. The contractors left the site. Oxford University was down and out. Never before in history has a group of people brought such havoc, but at the same time taught this university such a lesson. Never. I understand only too well the scientific arguments against vivisection. I can read scientific papers. I read books. I understand that this is not only a flawed science, it is going nowhere. But I understand something else as well. The people that prop this up, the universities, the contract testing laboratories, they will not give this up without a fight. As Peter said, there is too much money involved. And you know what? I've been doing this for 40 years now, and I understand one thing very clearly. The answer lies with you, me, and the rest of the grassroots animal rights movement that for many decades now have fought this so very hard. People have paid with their freedom, some with their lives. And yet here we are, still fighting. But the message has to come out. From me to you, and from all of you to Oxford University and every other testing facility in this country. We will not tolerate this any longer. We understand the scientific argument. And there is no ethical or moral case for you to torture animals for any gain at all. This is corrupt science. It has no place in the 21st century. But we have to do something about that. Me, you. I'm an animal rights activist, just like you. I'm not special. I went to prison for this fight. And you know what? I come down here now every week still. 10 years later. And every time I come here, my heart breaks a little more. That I'm still having to fight. But I know I'm not on my own. I know you all feel like I do. You all want to bring this to an end. The silence from here is louder than anything. Because vivisection, animal research, relies on that secret silence. We have to break it. We have to break it. There is no other way. All of us together, fighting together, every day. We must do this together. The easiest thing in the world would have been for us to pack up and leave Oxford after fighting this, to walk away and say we lost. But that's just not how this happens. That's not how this can be. We can never ever accept defeat like that. Because remember, no matter how much discomfort you feel, or how much you have to put yourselves through, imagine what's happening to them. In 2018 alone, 219,551 animals died at Oxford in the name of research. Think about that. And research for what? For what? When they know, those scientists know, that what they're practicing is an outdated science that has no place in the 21st century. It can only be propped up by a powerful elite who will continue with this murderous activity as long as we allow them to do it. But we can't allow them to do it. We mustn't allow them to do it. We have to stand together and keep fighting. Some of you, well, all of you would have seen today, little Scarlett beagle wandering around amongst you. A liberated beagle that was destined to die in laboratory experiments. And when you look into that little dog's eyes and see her looking back at you, what do you think? Is it pity? Is it anger? Is it sorrow? Or is it a raging injustice that we, the so-called superior species on this planet, can torture to death a sweet, intelligent, sentient being like Scarlett? What right do we ever have to do that? And how can we justify that right now? When as a so-called advanced, technologically advanced society, we have the means to help ourselves without torturing sentient beings like Scarlett.
Yeah, you hold it up.
So Scarlett, look at that. Just look into her eyes. Isn't she beautiful? Wouldn't you give anything? Wouldn't you do anything to save her? The future for laboratory animals lies with us. And the thing with this place is that you can't bear witness because you can't see the animals. We know that week in and week out now, way back to us, who attended slaughterhouses and farms to bear witness to the suffering of those animals and spreading it far and wide, and you can see it. And hopefully everyone will act on it, but you can't do that here. They're there, just across that lawn. They're there, they're that close. But you can't hear them. You can't see them. Sometimes down here, when we stand here every Thursday, we can smell them. As the smell of the rodents and other animals comes out the vents. It's as close as we ever get. But we know they're there. We know they're there. I don't know how much longer this is going to take. I've spent 40 years fighting. If I have to spend another 40 years, that's what I'll do. I'll keep going until I drop. I'll keep going until I've got nothing else to give. Because I believe, like you all do, that we have to do this. We have a duty. It's not just something we want to do. We are driven to do it. It is our duty as members of the human species to stand up for animals like Scarlett and the 16,000 other animals that are sat right there now. Because if we won't do it, who will? The grassroots animal movement has always been the driving force behind every radical change that's happened so far. And that is going to continue. When the final slaughterhouse closes its doors, the final laboratory shuts its doors, and all the cages are finally emptied, of course, it will be with the help of forward-thinking scientists and a society that's finally realised that torturing sentient beings isn't justified. But I am certain of one thing. I am absolutely certain that without the commitment of you people, it will never happen. We have to get out there. It's us who drives this. It's our commitment and our determination that will make sure that these atrocities are brought to an end. So I urge you, I plead with you, but above all else I stand with you. I stand united with each and every one of you on behalf of Scarlett and the millions and millions of voiceless animals that are waiting for their liberation. I've always been someone who's not been afraid to say publicly how I feel about this, and that hasn't changed. But sometimes even I suffer from the feeling of deep sadness, and that comes from being here when I stood and watched this place get built in front of me, and finally I was arrested and taken away. But I can say one thing again, on behalf of all those activists, some of them are here today and some of them who are no longer with us, who fought to stop this happening. We fought so hard, so very, very hard. We couldn't have given more, none of us. We gave everything we had to try and stop it. And yes, we lost. This battle we lost. But I'm clear about something else. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. This battle was lost, but the war to end animal suffering will be won by us, each and every one of us, because each and every one of us together is stronger than anything they can do. Anything. So, the silence. Silence of suffering. Look at it. The most enormous looking building ever, eh? A bit of brick, a bit of glass. You wouldn't think, would you, what's actually going on in there? There's no sign of what's happening in there. And that's deliberate. That's deliberate. So, friends, it's up to us. I can stand here and tell you what you already know, but you know in here what we have to do. You all know that we have to get up and fight every day. Tomorrow, the beginning of next week, we have to go out again and again. I will be here again on Thursday, as we have been for the last 15 years. We'll keep going. I'll keep going because I know that today I've been in Oxford with you people. You're amazing, brilliant, wonderful people. And that will keep me going because I'm a part of the greatest movement this planet has ever seen. A movement whose time will come. Make no mistake, our day will come. And when it does, all those people from Oxford and from every other laboratory down the country, from every slaughterhouse, every huntsman, every other person who bloodied their hands in the abuse of animals, will remember that a group of people like us brought down the most savage, hideous cruelty ever inflicted by one species on another. And we will do that together! Right, so come on! Let's pick ourselves up! Let's get strong! Let's fight! Fight and fight! Never give up! Never stop! Keep going! Believe you can win! We will win together! We will fight for these animals, for Scarlett and all the rest of them! Fight on! Never give up! Keep going! Never ever rest! Keep going! project.
Obviously, in an era with a huge growth in veganism, it's the job of each and every one of us to ensure that animals in labs are not forgotten, because they're just important as animals on farms and in other animal exploitation industries. So some of you know that my organisation, Animal Justice Project, focuses mainly on animals in universities under our Campus Without Cruelty campaign, such as the shadowy laboratories here at Oxford. We do this because half of all animal experiments in Britain take place on university campuses. This is a shocking statistic, but one we believe can be changed with positive outreach to students and a clear message that we do not need to use animals at all. In fact, 90% of animal research here in Britain is simply curiosity driven, so it need not have any benefit to humans whatsoever. Quite simply, vivisection takes place because it's always been done, so let's do it again culture. It's carried out because of profit and the desire to publish papers. We reach out to students mainly with our Lifeline campaign, though we also highlight the huge and increasing animal use by multi-million-pound charities such as Cancer Research UK and British Heart Foundation. These charities plough literally hundreds of thousands of pounds each year into animal research at universities. And we know this because their names are on the scientific papers that our researchers look at as key funders. I honestly question, at what point does a charity not become a charity? Surely an income of £600 million a year is that point. The last published figures on animal experiments in Britain show a tiny reduction from the year before. In 2017, 3.79 million experiments were carried out, which is just a 3.7% decrease from the year before. This equates to an unacceptable level of suffering taking place right now, each and every day. There is clearly a lot of work to be done. But we have found it increasingly difficult to find out exactly what is being done to animals in laboratories around the country. We've been sending freedom of information requests to almost every single university in Britain, every year without fail since 2016, and we've seen a very clear pattern. We believe that universities are deliberately evading answering questions about their animal experiments using a loophole in the Freedom of Information Act 2000, which means that universities can refuse to provide even the most basic information because they say they plan to publish this information on a website at some point later in the year, thus effectively hindering our chance of telling the public when we need to tell them about animals and what is happening to them inside university laboratories. Some of you might have seen our Missing campaign, which we launched recently, exposing the use of rabbits in universities. We named that campaign Missing because we are literally unable to find out what animals are housed inside British universities and how many. Out of 112 universities and university colleges contacted by Animal Justice Project this year, 7 universities haven't bothered answering at all. Over half of the universities contacted, which we know have animals, have refused to provide us the information we asked. And 33 universities, such as UCL, Edinburgh, King's College London, Oxford University, Manchester University, Imperial College London and Cambridge University have flat out refused to provide answers. But these universities have something else in common. They are the largest users of animals in Britain. And so we have universities killing the most animals, choosing when they want to tell the public about it, rather than when asked by the very same people that are often unwittingly funding this cruel research. We find this unacceptable, and it effectively means that our hands are tied for most of the year in terms of publishing how many and what species of animals are at each university. So Animal Justice Project carries out its own research into what is happening to animals inside university labs. For example, our Missing campaign highlights rabbit experiments inside universities, and based on the last available figures, predicts that around 26 rabbits each day are used in experiments. No wonder the universities don't want us to know. Animal Justice Project, however, usually works deliberately and mainly on areas of animal research rather than by species. This means our work invariably focuses on the smallest and most forgotten animals in labs, the rodents. Last month, we exposed some of the worst experiments we've ever seen on rats and mice at Cardiff University, a university killing almost 500,000 animals a year. Researchers have been subjecting animals there to severe brain damage. Yes, shame on them. They are using animals to see the effects of party drugs, of all things. Something that we see a lot at British universities. Rodents being injected with speed, MDMA, ecstasy, alcohol and nicotine. We see it all the time. The very same researchers at Cardiff that were involved in the notorious kitten experiments at the university back in 2012 are at it again, continuing their cruel and frankly bizarre experiments on mice and tree shrews, as if this makes it any better. Over the last couple of years, researchers at Cardiff have crushed countless nerves of rodents, attached steel rods and electrodes to their skulls, glued glass windows and aluminium plates into their brains, and induced crippling diseases. In one tuberculosis study, researchers induced inflammation into the brains and nervous systems of mice and watched as the animals became paralyzed and died. They've injected drugs into brains and left animals for months to assess seizures. They forced rodents to run on treadmills while their heads are restrained in devices, and induced arthritis by injecting toxins into animals' joints, causing ankles and legs to swell and paws to be deformed. Rats have had cannulas implanted into their brains so that researchers could inject lethal substances. They've had drugs injected into their eyeballs, been given nasty lesions, and are routinely forced to swim in water tanks. They've been drugged with liquid ecstasy and again left to suffer as researchers look on. This is the stuff of nightmares. What is going on inside Cardiff University is taking place everywhere, every single day in universities across Britain. If these animals were dogs, there would be an outcry. If these animals could scream, maybe their cries would make the job of the researcher that little bit too difficult. Universities will remain our focus because they are on our doorsteps. They are in our towns, and ending experiments at them is achievable. We ask that you please continue your fight for animals and laboratories just as we will. They need us, and only together we can end it.
There are hundreds and billions of animals that are suffering on this planet right now, and unfortunately this is not enough for them. Until every cage is empty, until every laboratory is shut down, until every slaughterhouse has stopped slaughtering, we need to be out there. We do not lose our freedom, we do not lose our lives for speaking up for the animals, but the animals do lose theirs if we don't, so we must.
We're all animals. We have to see each other as connected to each other. We have to stop being system apologists. We have to start looking outside of it. We've heard Peter Egan talk about it. Money. Everyone knows that money is what's causing and driving all these behaviours. There's nothing wrong with science. But when corporations are using it for their benefit and others are being oppressed, whether they're other animals or the human animals, and we're all suffering, then we've got to start looking at other ways in which to do this. This has to be where we all start working together and we all start freeing up every animal on this planet so that all of us can live free. Thank you very much.
As we leave the park today,
We know that the fight goes on. As I said earlier, this is just one day, one march. I've been on hundreds of these, hundreds. But I know that once I get out of here, I get home tonight, we start again. Tomorrow, we're out again, and the day after. And the fact of the matter is that it is us who has to do this. We are the driving force. There would be no animal rights movement without you people, and the dedication and the commitment that you all show. The animals have got their champion in you. Each one of you individually matters. Each one of you individually counts. Whatever group you work with, whatever action you take, and wherever you do it, you're part of a movement, the animal rights movement. And as far as I'm concerned, the animal rights movement is the single greatest movement that will ever be seen on this planet. Because we will be the people that will save this planet. We will be the people that will liberate these animals from the nightmare that human tyranny has kept them in for so very long. Our day is coming. Never forget that. Never ever lose heart. Never lose faith. Never lose focus. Because within each one of you lies the victory for animals. So let's fight on together. Never, ever, ever give up. Thank you very much.